So, 3 sections we're going to rock through. Oh, I guess this one here too. So we're done with this, right? We've gone through all the judges. We're in the end of it. The last couple chapters are stories not in linear fashion. So we're actually jumping kind of all over the place with these last 2 stories. But this was the first chunk. We finished it. Samson was the last guy. He tore down the temple, killed more people in one action than he did his whole life. It was a killer story. Pastor Jamie did a great job on that one. Main points. So, section 1, verse 1 through 13, a crime was judged. Section 1. Section 2 is going to be verses 14 through 46. It's going to be the meat of what we're talking about today. Civil war. Civil war. And then section 3 is just the last 2 verses, 47 and 48. A remnant. A remnant is going to be left. Section 1. A crime is judged. It said, verse 1 and 2, we talk about, it says, then all of Israel went out, and the congregation was gathered together as one man from Dan even to Beersheba in the land of Gideon. And unto the Lord in Mizpah, and the chief of all the people, even the tribes of Israel, presented themselves in assembly of the people of God, 400,000 footmen that drew the sword. Right? When this Levite cut that poor woman into pieces and sent her body parts to all 12 nations, that stirred things up a bit. People were slightly confused. What is going on? All of Israel here is represented at a place called Mizpah. It's a central point in the tribe of Benjamin, except for the Jabesh Gilead, which Pastor Jamie will talk about in the next chapter, right? Everyone here at this meeting stand in one accord, believing that what was done was pure evil, and they want answers. They want to know what happened. 400,000 men here are set evil right. Israel as a whole believes this is an unacceptable behavior. Would you not agree that what we read in the last chapter was pretty unacceptable? Disgusting, honestly. It was horrible. In verse 3, we come down, it says, now the children of Benjamin heard the children of Israel were gone up to Mizpah. Obviously, it's kind of hard to move 400,000 people and not be noticed, right? So Benjamin sees that there's an army coming, right? Now, Gibeon is only about 3 miles from Mizpah, right? So they're encamped very, very close, right? So these men gather together and demand that the Levite explain himself and tell them what happened. What exactly did these Benjamites do that made you hack this woman into 12 pieces and send her parts to all the tribes? Interestingly enough, I wonder who did the delivery. The Bible doesn't say. He said he had them sent out, but who took them? Interesting question, right? So they say down here, it says, tell us how was this wickedness, or how did this wicked deed happen? The explanation we're going to look at in 3 verses. Verse 4, 5, 6, and 7. Right? Now listen here. Levi, the husband of the woman, right? We'll get to that in here in just a moment, that was slain, answered and said, I came into Gibeah that which belongeth to Benjamin, I and my concubine to lodge. That's true. That's what happened. We read that last, right? He showed up, they wanted a place to stay. Said, and then he goes on, he says, and the men of Gibeah rose against me and beset the house round about upon me by night, and thought to have slain me, and my concubine have they forced that she is dead. Also true, but not quite. He's leaving some things out. We'll get to that in just a second. And they had thought of slain me, and my concubine have they forced that she is dead. Verse 6, he goes, I took my concubine and cut her into pieces and sent her out throughout the country as of the inheritance of Israel, for they have committed lewdness and folly. Right? Lewdness and folly. This word folly you also use as outrage. Right? Is the outrageous deed that these guys have done. Verse 7, he says, behold, you are all the children of Israel. Give here your advice and counsel. He goes, you've heard my story. What do you think we should do about it? All right? So the Levite recounts the story of who, what, when, and where. Notice he refers to her as a concubine, not a wife. These women and the children they bear are a lower social status than a man's wife. The Hebrew word used here, as Jamie talked about last week, is pilagesh, which defined means paramour. Paramour is someone who's having an improper sexual relationship, right? So the word that's used here is against God's word. It's not something that's to be allowed. but they're doing it anyways, right? So when people say, oh, the Bible's, people had concubines and harems and it's okay, the Bible says it's a good thing. Well, no, it doesn't. It actually says it's a very bad thing right from the very, very beginning, hence pedagogish, the word used. So this is not something that should be happening, but it is. Now, this is an unacceptable relationship in the eyes of God. To see how they were mistreated, one example we can read about is Abraham in Genesis 25:6. I think Pastor Jamie used this exact same verse too, where Abraham gives gifts to his concubine sons and sent them away for his son to take the high place, Isaac. Simplified, these women were essentially sex slaves. Not cool. He goes on to explain that the Benjamites wanted to rape and murder him, so he offered her up to save himself after the deed was done, to show Israel how disgusting an act and to fill Israel with outrage towards them. Finally, he asked for counsel from the amassed army, and he says, what should we do now? Now, I want you to notice something. That the Levite twisted this story here when he was explaining it for his own advantage, right? What he said was true, but he didn't mention the cruel and callous way that he abandoned his concubine to the mob. He knew Israel would be mad, but he didn't want the wrath to fall on him. Remember, it was him who tossed her out to them. But in the story he recounts to Israel, he just said they took her. He's covering his own self. He knows what he's done is way wrong. He gave her up, but he doesn't want to tell them that, right? Interesting little side note there. As covering his own self here. So we move on to verse 8 here. And all the people rose as one man, saying, we will not any of us go to his tent, neither will any of us turn into his house. Israel determines to turn their back on Benjamin. They're like, we are done dealing with these people. This is true. We're not going to deal with these guys at all. Brothers or not, we're done. This is horrible and it's unacceptable. In verse 9 we come in, it says, but now this shall be the thing in which we will do to Gibeah. We will go up by lot against it. They decided to fight against them by lot or by family, one at a time. And you'll see they've actually done this before. We'll get to this in a minute. I think it's Joshua, very early in Joshua, when they're going up against each of the battles, like who goes first? And it's usually Judah gets sent first, right?
Joshua 7.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the earlier Joshuas, when they start to fight, like, how do we do this? Like, we're going to go by family. Judah is the biggest army. So they're usually the ones that get sent first. And then after that, they kind of cordon them all off, and then each little group kind of goes. Right? So we get to verse 10, and he says, and we will take 10 men of 100 throughout all the tribes of Israel, and 100 out of 1,000, 1,000 out of 10,000 to fetch victuals for the people, that they may do when they come to Gibeah of Benjamin, according to all the folly they have wrought in Israel. So men are sent out to get war supplies for the many, is what this is talking about. So, okay, we're going to fight. We're going to fight. We got an army of 400,000 people. We need food. We need water. We need rations, blacksmiths. We need to sharpen our swords. We need all of the things. So they cordon off and they take all these people and they say, go get all the things that we need for the army to go. All right? They're about to punish Benjamin for the vileness that he has occurred. Now this sounds extreme, but it's actually proper fulfillment of God's commands. And you can go write this down, Deuteronomy 13, 12 through 18 talks about this. Also, you remember when they took Jericho and Joshua, and the one guy, remember, he steals some clothes and some gold, and what do they end up doing? They don't end up just killing him, right? They killed everybody. His whole family, right? Sons, daughters, cousins, all of his animals, right? So this is the command. He goes, hey, you do evil, and you bring it into Israel, this is the response. And so this is what they're preparing to do. They're about to go to battle. It's about to get pretty intense. Verse 11 says, so all the men of Israel were gathered against the city, knit together as one man. Israel is united here. And they decide to bring justice to the people of Gibeah. Civil war has officially begun. So we are attacking each other. Brothers and sisters, right? The worst thing you can imagine. Civil war is horrible, right? Most countries don't get taken over. The big mass, Rome, Greece, they didn't fall because people came in. They rotted from the inside. They fought each other. And this is what's starting right off the bat. They're about to start fighting and quarreling within. This is going to be a pretty rough battle here. So, In verse 11 and 12, we come down here. 11 and 13, excuse me. In 12, it says, the tribes of Israel sent men through all the tribes of Benjamin, saying, what wickedness is this that is done among you? Now therefore deliver us the men, the children of Belial, which are in Gibeah, that we may put them to death and put away evil from Israel. But, usually one of my favorite words, but not here. But the children of Benjamin would not hearken to the voice of the brethren of the children of Israel. So they sent men to all the tribes, all the little towns, everywhere, saying, bring out the people who did this. Let us punish them. Bring them out, we're going to take them out, right? They're condemning the wickedness that was brought, and they want the people responsible. But the tribes refused. They said no. They said no. It blew my mind when I read this. They're like, oh yeah, we don't see this as a bad thing. We're not going to give them to you. Right? What kind of person would not turn in such a twisted and vile person? Right? The other tribes tried to justly resolve the crisis without the full civil war. Right? They get the people who did it, punish them, their families, their animals. They could just get them. Benjamin said no. No, we're going to protect these people. Interesting frame of mind you can see that Benjamin is in right now. Right? Very interesting. Okay, so section 2, right? Civil War. The Civil War. Verse 14. But the children of Benjamin gathered themselves together out of the cities unto Gibeah to go out to battle against the children of Israel. Remember, they know, we read in verse 2 or 3, that they knew that an army of 400,000 people had showed up. And they're like, we'll fight you. I don't think they're in their right mind, honestly. That's craziness, right? So Benjamin said no, and they gathered together their own army in a mass outside of Gibeah and prepared themselves for battle. Verse 15, and the children of Benjamin were numbered at that time out of the cities 26,000 men that drew the sword, beside the inhabitants of Gibeah, which were numbered 700 chosen men. So they have 26,000 men that they were able to gather out of all of the little cities and towns all throughout Benjamin, against the entire mass 400,000 army of Israel, right? So Benjamin said no and gathered together their own, and they prepared. Out of the cities, they were able to gather, again, 26,000, and added another 700 within the city itself. That's all they got. That's their whole army, and they're about to go toe-to-toe with all of Israel. Verse 16 says, among all this people, there were 700 chosen men left-handed. Everyone could sling stones at a hairbreadth and miss not. So the 700 left-handed men were chosen, all who were crazy accurate with their slings. But let's take a look at this word. This is interesting. Miss. The kata. The actual definition of this word is to sin. So when you look at the word to sin, it means to miss the mark. To sin against God is to miss the mark that He set for us, right? God says, this is how I want you to live. And you've missed the mark in which He has for you. You have kata. You've missed. You've sinned, right? And so they're saying, this is how accurate they were, that they're perfect in their throws. Very dangerous men, right? Very, very dangerous men here. So the illustration of the principle of the word sin literally means to miss the mark, as we just said, whether you're off by an inch or a mile. Kata. I love it. It's an interesting word. Verse 17, right? And the men of Israel, beside Benjamin, were numbered 400,000 that drew the sword. All of these were men of war. Right? So these are the fighting guys. They didn't just grab the young farmers and all these guys knew how to fight. Very, very dangerous men, right? So, on the other hand, 400,000 men of war. Israel here believes that the greatest good was not unity with Benjamin. Right? It said the whole time they keep saying that the army came in and they're all of one mind here. Right? They've all decided together to go against Benjamin. Unity apart from truth and justice is not unity worth having. And they've all come down to this conclusion. Right? Verse 18 says, and the children of Israel rose and went up to the house of God and asked counsel of God and said, which of us shall go up first to battle against the children of Benjamin. And the Lord said, Judah shall go first. Now I want you to look at this word, house of God. We would pronounce it Bethel, but it's Beth-El, right? There's a popular Christian band named Bethel. But Bethel means house of God. Now, it's known as an ancient place, seat of worship in Ephraim on the border of Benjamin, right where we're at, right? So this is what they're actually talking about, the town of Bethel, right? Identified previously with Luz. Okay, so question, where exactly did they go? Because there's two places known as house of God, Shiloh and Bethel. From Joshua to the day of the priest Eli, from Joshua 18:10 through 1 Samuel 1:3, the ark is located in Shiloh. So what is this house of God that they're talking about? King James capitalizes God in the verse, so it does mean there is a shrine for God in Bethel. Some commentators say it was an ancient place, set of worship in Ephraim, like we just said here, known as Luz. Now you can read about this in Genesis 28:19, where you can see that this was called the city of Luz. Okay. Also stated it is a place south of the country of Judah, not far from Beersheba and Ziklag. Either way, they asked, who should attack first? And God answers, Judah. Note, in Genesis 35:1, Jacob makes an altar to God in Bethel. Right? So we know there's an altar that has been made there. So maybe they had built a shrine around this altar. Maybe there's somebody there holding ground. Maybe they're sojourning Levite. We're not sure. But this is the place that they go to talk to God, to ask God, what should we do in Bethel? Verses 19 through 21 says, and the children of Israel rose up in the morning and encamped against Gibeah. Right? This is Judah here. And the men of Israel went out to battle against Benjamin, and the men of Israel put themselves in array to fight against them at Gibeah. So they had battle formations, everyone's all lined up, ready to go early in the morning, right? They're probably kind of excited to get justice laid down, they're ready to go. Also, it's cooler in the morning than it is during midday. I wouldn't recommend fighting midday out there, it would not be very fun at all. Verse 21 says, and the children of Benjamin came forth out of Gibeah and destroyed down to the ground of the Israelites that day 22,000 men. That's almost a man for man from Benjamin's, because they got 26,000 and they killed 22,000. That's insane. These guys are real dangerous. And they said their slings wouldn't miss. They were serious. The Bible's right on with that.
And it says they're left-handed.
Also,
so they'll have an advantage because everyone's expecting them to be right-handed.
Yep.
They block with their right, like the same hands that come towards them. So
it's a harder block. It's like playing baseball against a left-handed pitcher.
Yes.
Throws you off something fierce because the ball comes at you as a right-handed batter. Instead of, so Jamie makes a good point there. Being left-handed also kind of throws you off your game a little bit. So Judah gets up early in the morning, positions himself against the city. Benjamin comes out. They're ready to fight. Benjamin wipes the floor with Judah. Absolutely devastates them. Verse 22. And the people, the men of Israel, encouraged themselves and set their battle again array in the place where they put themselves in array the first day. So they retreat. Say, okay, what was that? We got this. We weren't prepared. Everybody get back in position. We're gonna try this again, right? They regroup, restation, exactly as they did beforehand, which is interesting, right? So how they arranged themselves, how they went into fight, failed. They didn't decide to make any changes. They set themselves up exactly how they were before, right? The definition of insanity is what? Doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for them to regroup exactly how they did it before and expect a different outcome. Let's see what happens. 23. And the children of Israel went up and wept before the Lord until evening and asked counsel of the Lord, saying, shall I go up again to battle against the children of Benjamin, my brother? And the Lord said, go up against him. So they begged God through tears on whether they should fight against Benjamin, and God says yes, right? They go up, they cry, say, God, we thought you said to go. And so we went, and we lost. What do? God says, go. go. Verse 24 and 25 comes in and says, the children of Israel came near against the children of Benjamin the second day. And Benjamin went forth against them out of Gibeah the second day, and destroyed down to the ground of the children of Israel again 18,000 men. All of these drew the sword. 18,000. Day 2. Fighting once again, they trounce Judah. Absolutely slaughter them. So far, the Benjamites have killed 40,000 men of war from the tribe of Judah. Considering the whole Benjamite army consists only of 26,700 men, that's pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. So I don't know if they got generals in there that are just like know exactly how to do battle, but they're winning. Question, why is Benjamin winning? God said go. Judah's obeying them. Judah's obeying God. Why is Benjamin winning? They're the wicked guys, right? They're the bad guys. It's crazy to think though, right? It's like, hey, we're going to go punish the bad guys. You go in there and the bad guys punish you. And you're supposed to have God on your side. God said go. So it doesn't seem that God is with them. The Bible tells us that it's not us who win battles. It's God. So if they're losing, is God not with them? Are they possibly relying on their own strength and prowess and not God's? In Judges 1:19 tells us that victory only comes from God. Are you trying, question to ask yourself, are you trying to be victorious in your life without God? Sad news, you cannot. You cannot be victorious in this life without God. Verse 26. Then all the children of Israel and all the people went up and came into the house of God. And here's this term again, house of God, and wept and sat there before the Lord and fasted that day until evening and offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before the Lord. So this term here, house of God, again is Bethel. But Bethel simply means house of God. Right. Still weeping this time, but they did a few more things different. Right? One thing they did is they fasted. Why is fasting so important? Fasting helps us draw near to God, surrender ourselves to God, to hear God's direction, and to steel ourselves with determination to do God's will. Along with that, they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings. So burnt offerings, as we know, according to God in Leviticus 1:9, 13, and 17, are to atone for their sins and to placate the wrath of God. The peace offering represented one's fellowship upward to God and outward to men. It was given in thanks for God's blessings. When this offering was made, God, the priest, the offerer, and his family and friends shared in a common meal and fellowship as all these parties ate a part of the sacrificed animal. You can read about this offering in Leviticus 3, 1 through 5. Okay? So now they made themselves right with God, and they inquired of him again. So, verse 27 and 28, and the children of Israel inquired of the Lord. And here's our tip as to where they are. For the ark of the covenant of God was there in those days. And Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before it in those days, saying, shall I yet again go out to battle against the children of Benjamin, my brother, or shall I cease? And the Lord said, go up, for tomorrow I will deliver them into thine hand. Notice the difference here. Before he just said, yeah, go. Yeah, go. That's the right thing to do, go. But this time he said, yes, go, and I will deliver them into your hand. Now notice, Bethel is right here, right? Gibeon, here's Benjamin, Jericho. We know that battle. We're about to see a very similar thing go down here in just a moment. Here's Shiloh. So they're here at an altar, and then they decide to actually go where the Ark of the Covenant is and talk to God, right? This, I believe, makes a really, really, really big difference. So they inquired of God where the Ark was located. And where is that again? Shiloh. Joshua 1:18 tells us this. Now we are told that Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before the Ark. this actually helps us with the timeline of where this story takes place. Because remember, I was telling you, up until 17, it's linear, right? We start, Joshua dies, just as we go through, and then it stops. And these stories are kind of sprinkled in and out. So this tells us Phinehas, son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron, stood before the ark. It could not have been too long after the death of Joshua. So this is actually fairly early into the book of Judges where this story takes place. So they asked Phinehas to ask God, and God says, go up, you will be victorious. Now they know that God is with them, right? They've done what they're supposed to do. They stopped relying on themselves. They fasted. They made sacrifices for their sins. They made peace offerings with God. They made themselves right with God before they went out. And they put the decision in God's hands instead of their own. And what do we see? God's about to bless this adventure. Verse 29. And Israel set liars in wait around Gibeah. These are ambushers. These liars in wait that ambush. They're going to set an ambush here. Okay? Now, the third battle is about to begin, and they decide to employ a strategy that has worked in the past. In Joshua 8, verse 4 through 29, this strategy is used to defeat the army at Ai, right here. We talked about that. That was a really cool one we went through. That's one where we learned when he held up the spear. We learned it was actually a scimitar that was shining the light from the sun to tell them from long distance when to go in, right? You remember that? So they set themselves up just as they did in the previous two battles. Interesting again, right? We said insanity, but this time, God's with them. This is the tactic, right? Setting themselves up the same way they did before. This is how Benjamin jumps out and goes, ha, we've seen this. Aha, we know what you're about to do, and we whooped you twice. So this gives them this false sense of victory, right? But this time, they have an ambush set up behind the city waiting, just like they did in Ai, right? A whole group of guys hiding, waiting. Verse 30. And the children of Israel went up against the children of Benjamin on the third day and put themselves in array against Gibeah as at other times. So they lined up to give Benjamin that false sense of victory. Benjamin sees them, says, we know how to beat them. Verse 31, the children of Benjamin went out against the people and were drawn away from the city. And they began to smite of the people and kill, as at other times, in the highways, of which one goeth up to the house of God, and the other to Gibeah in the field, about 30 men of Israel. So they got a plan, but Benjamin's still a pretty nasty army here. They're still killing Israelites, right? But this time, they're starting to pull them up. They're drawing them out into the highways, away from the city, right? When you're fighting in a city, you have what's called choke points. What they're doing is they're relieving choke points, and they're widening the battle out. You widen the battle, and you thin the line, right? So this is the point of pulling back, is to thin their line out. So it's not 10 men deep, it's 5, and then 4, and then 3, and then maybe 2 men deep. A lot easier to break through, right? It's strategic. But they're still getting men killed. The battle is still very, very, very fierce. So verse 31, Benjamin rushes out to fight, probably eager for another victory. Judah begins a false retreat. Benjamin kills another 30 men. They're drawn out towards Bethel, out of the fields and the highways. Right, verse 32. And the children of Benjamin said, they are smitten down before us as at the first. But the children of Israel said, let us flee and draw them from the city into the highways. So Benjamin thinks they're winning just like they were before. I mean, they're killing people. It looks the same. Israel's backing up. They're starting to run away. Israel calls for the full false retreat out of the way of the cities into the highways and fields. So let's see how this works out. Verse 33. All the men of Israel rose up out of their place and put themselves in array at Baal Tamar. And the liars in wait of Israel came forth out of their places, even out of the meadows of Gibeah. Israel regrouped at a place called Baal Tamar, which means Lord of the Palms, right? Remember, every little city-state back there all worshipped Baal, but a different form of Baal. And every Baal they had a different name. Baal this, Baal that, Baal this. So this one, they worship Baal, the Lord of Palms. So this is the area that they're at. So they have an ambush also set here. So they're fighting and they're trying to draw everyone back. And they're trying to get them back because there's another ambush. Like they got backup, right? They're pulling them out. So good place to do it if it's called, the Lord of Palms. Lots of hiding places. If you're out in the desert and the stickweeds, there's nowhere to hide. But here, men can get down and hide, be unseen by the enemy. Verse 34. And there came against Gibeah 10,000 chosen men out of Israel, and the battle was sore. But they knew not that evil was near them. 10,000 Israelites popped out and joined the battle. 10,000 of them. They were fighting, and we were told that the battle was extremely fierce. Still, even with 10,000 guys jumping out to jump in and help, it was a heated fight. Benjamin fought hard and had no idea that evil or disaster, we know the word to put in there, was near. The tide of the battle was about to change. Okay, we're about to see a turning point here. Verse 35, the key word, and the Lord smote Benjamin before Israel. Who did it? Not Judah, not the men, it was God. God was victorious here. All credit goes to God, not the people, right? This is really, really important that you notice this. And the Lord smote Benjamin before Israel. And the children of Israel destroyed of the Benjamites that day 20 and 5,100 men, all of these which drew the sword. The Lord defeated or smote who was winning. God is victorious. All your victories come from God. All good things come from God, right? Verse 36. So the children of Benjamin saw that they were smitten. For the men of Israel gave place to the Benjamites because they trusted into the liars in wait, which they had set beside Gibeah, right? So this is that. They're talking about how they were backing up. Benjamin thinks they're winning because Judah is retreating and thinning out. And what happens, so you got a wall of men, everyone's fighting, they start doing this. They start curving out, start thinning their lines. What happens to Benjamin, as they push forward, they start falling out and thinning their lines. Once they come in far enough, 10,000 men pop up right behind them. Now they're surrounded, right? It's battle tactic. Now Benjamin's surrounded, right? Verse 36. But they didn't know what was about to hit them. Verse 37. And the liers in wait hasted and rushed upon Gibeah, and the liers in wait drew themselves along and smote all the city with the edge of the sword. The ambushers that were waiting behind the city got their signal, rushed it. And they started killing everybody and lighting fires, burning the whole place to the ground, right? Just like they did in Ai. Rushed in, slaughtered, lit on fire. 38. Now there was an appointed sign between the men of Israel and the liers in the way that they should make a great flame with the smoke rise up out of the city, just like as they did in Ai, right? Great fire starts going up. Verse 39. And when the men of Israel retired in battle, Benjamin began to smite and kill of the men of Israel about 30 persons. For they said, surely they are smitten down before us as in the first. Israel is getting tired, is what this is saying. The battle is raging on. We're told it's super, super fierce. They have the backup. Things are going in their in their favor, but they're getting tired, right? They're getting tired. And Benjamin was able to take another 30 guys, which then they're like, hey, they are falling. We got this, right? Again, a false sense of hope. They think they won. They think there's still a chance. Verse 40. But, there it is, back to my favorite word again. But, when the flame began to arise up out of the city with the pillars of smoke, the Benjamites looked behind them, and behold, the flame of the city ascended up into heaven. They're fighting, and all of a sudden they turn and see, and there's a huge column of smoke going up. And they know what has just happened. They hit 41. And when the men of Israel turned again, the men of Benjamin were amazed, for they saw the evil that was come upon them. They were shocked. They were terrified. The realization that they weren't winning, that it was all a ruse, it was a trap, and they fell for it, and their city was burning. They freaked out, sort of amazed. They panicked. Panic overcame these guys, right? Israel is emboldened. They turn back again on Benjamin. They see the fire. They say, aha! Our first liars in wait are with us and we're fighting. The second wave, successful. And so they get emboldened and they start fighting harder. They start fighting even harder. 43 says, thus they enclosed the Benjamites round about and chased them and trode them down with ease over against Gibeah toward the sun rising. They drove them eastward and slaughtered them. Now suddenly they folded out, popped up, surrounded them, closed it. Started wrecking them. Benjamites are freaking out. Brothers are dying left and right. They can see the smoke rising from their city. Their whole plan is falling apart. Chaos has ensued on the battlefield. Absolute chaos. Verse 44. And there fell of Benjamin 18,000 men. All of these were men of valor. Not just men that held the sword. These were the elites that they had. Dropping. Chaos. Absolute chaos is ensuing. 18,000 men of valor died. Verse 45. And they turned and fled towards the wilderness unto the rock of Rimmon. And they gleaned of them in the highways 5,000 men, and pursued hard after them unto Gittim, and slew 2,000 men of them. Benjamin fled towards the rocks of Rimmon. Israel killed 5,000 men on the road, and 2,000 more in Gittim. Benjamin is lost. They're no longer in battle formation. All their ranks have been torn down. It's every man for themselves, and they're running. They're running. It's all they can do is run and hope that they can escape, right? Finding their way through the cracks. Section 3. A remnant. I had to remember what we call this one. A remnant. Right? God always tells us that he has a remnant. Right? Good Bible word, the remnant. Come into verse 46. So that all which fell that day of Benjamin were 20 and 5,000 men that drew the sword. All of these were men of valor. Staunch warriors. Staunch warriors. Not just young guys that just don't know what they're doing. Battle-hardened men. Right? These are the ones that start dropping. 25,000 Benjamites died by the sword. 25,000. The whole army was how many? Does anyone remember? Go ahead, yeah.
Was it 27?
Yeah, about 20, almost 27,000, 26,700 people. Like,
Yeah.
almost the whole army in one shot. Gone. Woo. Chaos is absolutely running amok right now. Verse 47, but, is that remnant. 600 men turned and fled to the wilderness under the rocks of Rimmon, and abode in the rocks of Rimmon for 4 months. Right, I'm just going to jump ahead a little bit. 600 men were able to get away, and were able to get into the rocks, get into the crevices, the caves, and hide. 600. That's it. Verse 48. And the men of Israel turned again upon the children of Benjamin, and smote them with the edge of the sword, as well as the men of every city, as the beast, and all that came to hand. Also they set on fire all of the cities they came to. They went town by town, to village, killing every single Benjamite they could find, including every single animal they had. And then they burnt those cities to the ground. The remnant. Now, Pastor Jamie, he's going to talk next week about what they decided to do with this, because they've realized they've just about eliminated the entire tribe. We know that only 600 are left out of the entire tribe of Benjamin. Almost wiped them all completely. This is massive. This is insane. This isn't just taking out a few people. The entire tribe was wiped out, save 600 men. Now, you know, every time I get a chance to get up here, we're going to talk about Romans Road. We look at this, right? Romans 3:23 says, for all sin falls short of the glory of God. We saw before the kata, we've all missed that mark. Every single one of us. We can read the stories in here, right? Some people's sin is much more obvious and on the shirt than others. The Benjamites, very obvious sin. We've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, right? All of us. Romans 6:23 says that the wages of that sin is death. We can see here in Judges that the wages of the sin that these Benjamites did was death. And not just the ones who committed the crime, but almost the entire tribe of Benjamin were punished for this. Romans 5:8, but God commended his love towards us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Right? God took your death and paid it off. Whereas your sin debt, we owe God a debt of, a sin debt, a debt of death. Christ took your place, right? He took your place, took my place, took everyone's place. But what do we do with that information? When we know that all have sinned, the wages, the price, the punishment for sin is death, not just the physical death, right? Time waits for no man. If Jesus tarries long enough, we're all going 6 feet in the dirt. It's the second death. We read about that in Revelation chapter 19. Cast into the lake of fire. Anyone who's not written in the book of life is cast in the lake of fire. There's that second death that Jesus warns us about in Matthew. What do we do with this information? Romans 10:9. Confess with your mouth the Lord Jesus Christ. Confess that he is who he says he is. God. And believe in your heart that God has raised him from the dead, and thou shalt be saved. He defeated death. He conquered it. You believe that with everything you are saved. You are sealed. The angel comes through with the scroll and seals us all those who believe. It's important that you have this foundation, to share this with other people, to help them understand the situation that we're in. We're all in a sinking boat. And without Christ and his substitutionary death, lost. Okay. 3 final thoughts, you guys. Are you living your life without God? We can see the ramifications of that in this story. It's not good. Without God, there is no victory. Can you see the example of the story on why living without God is a mistake? You can see the consequences of following your own heart. Right? We know that Jeremiah 17:9 says the heart is incredibly wicked and incurably ill. Who can know it but God? We're told throughout the whole book of Judges that at this time there was no king, and every man did as they thought in their own heart. That was good. And you can see what happens when you follow your own heart. For all of sin and fallen short of the glory of God. This is a horrible, horrible story, but don't think for a second that you can't get pulled into that. Sin is very seductive, and it will draw you and it will pull you quicker than you can imagine. You need God in your life. You need to follow God's will and have his guidance. And then finally, it's just me begging you guys to please make God a priority in your life. Seek God. Seek him. He only wants what's good for you. He never has anything bad for you. He wants the best for you at all times. Sometimes it's not what you think you want. God's will is always good.